Okay, so today we're going to do a deep dive into something a little different.
Oh,
Yeah, a textbook.
a textbook.
Yeah, on medieval India.
Interesting.
So this textbook was designed for higher secondary students.
Okay.
So think like 11th and 12th grade back in the day.
Back in the day. Okay.
And the really fascinating thing is this is only part 2
Part 2.
of the textbook.
Oh, so there's a whole other...
Who knows
What?
what historical gems we missed
Right.
in part I.
Oh, that's really interesting. It makes you wonder what they decided to put in part 1 and what they saved for part 2.
Yeah, and what the progression is.
Right. Like what's the through line
Exactly.
for the whole curriculum?
Yeah, it's like we're jumping into like the middle of a story here.
Yeah.
But speaking of building a story, this textbook has some serious academic firepower behind it.
Oh.
The editorial board is like a who's who of history professors.
Okay.
So the chairman is Professor Satish Chandra. And then we've got people like R.S. Sharma, Jarun Day, and Sumit Sarkar.
Wow. So these are all big names in the field.
Huge names.
Wow. It makes you wonder if like this textbook is trying to present like a unified narrative of medieval India, or if they're allowing for a lot of different interpretations and perspectives to come through.
Right, because you've got all these different scholars with different backgrounds, different areas of focus, different maybe even opinions on certain things.
Yeah, how do they bring all of that together into a single book for students?
And speaking of a specific moment in time, this book was first published in June of 1978.
1978. Okay, so that's interesting because India was still, a relatively young nation at that point.
Yeah.
A lot of changes happening politically, socially. I wonder how the textbook kind of reflects the events, the atmosphere of that era.
Yeah.
Like, how does it address topics like national identity,
Right.
cultural heritage?
It's like this textbook isn't just about the history of medieval India.
Yeah.
It's also a product of its own time.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
And get this, it was only 3.65 rupees.
3.65 rupees. Wow. That's amazing. It makes you think about access to education back then.
Right.
Was this considered affordable for most students?
Yeah.
Were there any government subsidies or programs in place to make sure everyone could get their hands on this book?
Right. Were there used bookstores? Were there libraries?
Yeah.
All sorts of questions come up.
Exactly.
Now, speaking of questions, the foreword
by
the director of the National Council of Educational Research and Training really piqued my interest. They talk about this new educational pattern that allows students to specialize in certain subjects at the higher secondary level.
Interesting. So that's that terminal higher secondary stage you were talking about earlier.
Exactly.
So this suggests that the textbook wasn't just about learning history. It was about preparing students for, certain careers or further education in history. Was this a new concept in India's educational system?
Yeah.
And like, how successful was it in actually achieving its goals?
Yeah. It makes you think about the purpose of education as a whole.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
What is it supposed to do?
Right.
Is it to create well-rounded citizens? Or is it to prepare people for very specific jobs?
Yeah.
And how do you balance those two things?
Right. How much agency did students have in choosing their path?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Wow. It's like we've only just scratched the surface here.
Totally.
Of not only medieval India,
Right.
but also the educational landscape
Absolutely.
of 1978 India.
Yeah. And it leaves us with so much to think about, like, given, the publication date, the intended audience.
Yeah.
What do you think are some of the key events or figures in medieval India that would have gotten special attention in this book?
Right.
And how do those choices reflect the priorities and perspectives of that era?
Wow. Such great questions to ponder. I feel like I need to get my hands on a copy of Part I and then revisit Part 2.
Me too.
To really get the full picture.
Absolutely.
Well, this has been a fascinating deep dive. Thanks for joining us on this journey
Thanks for having me.
through history and education.
It's been great.
Until next time.
See you then.